On a Sphere's Edge. Written by Keith Mosher. Narrated by Keith Mosher. Chapter 1. The Gift. You don't always get what you want. Raul Daoud held a rather ordinary plastic and metal box in his outstretched arms. The box, more of a travel case, was old and abused with a faded and tattered shoulder strap attached to it. As the elderly Eridani opened the case, he closed his eyes and bowed his head as if in reverence. Lieutenant Commander Alexandra Novastra cautiously reached inside and touched its contents. Silky smooth and cool it felt. Almost unreal, the way a legend should feel, she thought. She lifted the sphere out. Its size belied its weight. Despite her strength, it was almost too heavy for her to hold with one hand. Almost. The sphere was a little smaller than her palm. It had no color of its own, the finest optical mirrors paling in comparison to its reflectivity. Despite the distortions caused by its spherical shape, the reflections on its curved surface were perfect. It was cut by several thin lines, dividing it into a host of pentagons, triangles, and trapezoids, like facets of a diamond, all of roughly the same size and area. The dividing cuts were ultra-thin, supremely straight, and perfectly proportioned. The edges of the slices showed no indentations or imperfections at their borders. When held correctly, Alex could see through some slices. She could not determine whether the sphere was hollow or solid, nor had she any idea what force or substance kept it from falling apart in her hand, though she could feel that the cuts were indeed gaps between adjacent facets. While she held it, her hand grew slightly warm, and her palm became pink. She had been told by the Eridani that it was beyond price. Simplicity can be striking, but when surpassed by perfection and superimposed with mystery and an almost religious fervor, it can be awe-inspiring. It took some effort to pull her eyes away from the sphere. Raul had moved across the room and was standing with his back to her. She noticed that he was watching her in the reflection of one of his large picture windows. She must take it and return to HQ. Those had been her orders. She had kept this secret from Raul. He would not have confided anything in her if he knew she was an officer of the fleet. But the pretty bauble shook that thought from her head and called for her attention once more. She looked at the sphere again. It was beauty itself. She could not take it to HQ. She must keep it for herself. Raul had told her to keep it. It was a gift. Her attention to duty dictated otherwise, but she could feel some purpose to this thing. She turned away. Her job outweighed all other considerations. Again it called for her gaze. It captivated her attention completely. Her imagination drifted as she stared at it. As it consumed her thoughts, she was unaware how close she moved it to her blue-green eyes. It became all she could see both in her sight and mind. It grew larger in her consciousness until it was the environment of her thought. The reflections of the world outside became the colors of the new world the sphere created, with her at its center. She no longer looked at it. She became a part of it. She was lost, and yet she was home. Was she holding the sphere, or in it? Did she possess it, or it her? She tried to remove its grasp. She tried to remember anything. It was all gone, all except the sphere. The sphere. Space and time converged in her mind as children sung portions of rhyme and crowds cheered her name. Or were they shouting, "The sphere!" Suddenly her new world tumbled. It swirled, spinning uncontrollably, and then shrank as it fell out from under her. The sphere impacted the floor with a thunderous clang. The sounds faded. The reflections vanished into the diminished colors of reality accompanied by pain. She shook her head, throwing her deep brown, almost black locks of shoulder-length hair from her face as she found herself lying on the floor. She looked up and saw Raul's towering, pale purple figure over her. "I'm sorry, Alexandria. I hope I did not damage you. Sometimes a good swift kick is the only cure to its grasp." What happened? What's going on? The sphere. Where's the sphere? I saw it fall. Is it okay? Alex began groping around frantically. "Stop," shouted Rawl. "Leave it. Look at me. It is fine. It is indestructible by any conventional means. Just keep your eyes on me." He was both calm and insistent. Alexandra did as Rawl instructed and looked up at him, her mind still swimming with half-dreams. She had had hangovers before. Alcohol hangovers were bad, but usually hit her in the stomach. Lotus tended to give her a strange lightheadedness that would last for days. As an officer, she had been in fights and brawls. She was not a big woman, but she was a healthy one. She had held her own against fairly large brutes despite taking some swift shots to the head, but nothing felt like this. Rawl said firmly, "You must never look at it again. What it possesses is beyond price, and it is extremely powerful, as I told you. It can be as damaging as it can be helpful." He smiled and stuck out his hand as if to help Alexandria up. Instead, taking aim with his peripheral vision, he closed his eyes, bent over and grabbed the sphere. His eyes still shut tightly, he placed it back into its case. Once it was safely put away, he opened his eyes and assisted Alex to her feet. "Your thoughts will be confused for a short while. It will pass soon and suddenly." Rawl helped Alex across his living room. "It would be best if you diverted your attention." He helped her into a chair. Alex felt disconnected. Rawl tapped on a monitor in front of her. "This may help." Watching the local news did help her to come back to reality. The stories and commercials flashing by reminded her of the banality of everyday life, and her attention moved away from the swirling mental and emotional stresses built up by her hallucinogenic sphere trip. Still they were there, but she could ignore them. She turned from the screen and shifted in the chair, a slight grimace indicating she momentarily yielded to the sore spot where Rawl had kicked her. Just what happened anyway? What is it about that thing beyond all the legends? Those old stories do tell a lot, but I admit they can be misleading and confused. All I really know comes from those legends and what its last keeper told me, and my own experiences and some personal experiments. Rawl sat down and rested his thin, bony elbows on his thin, bony knees. He appeared to be mentally preparing for a difficult conversation. I believe a mind focused on the sphere encounters some form of magnetic wave fronts that harmonize with a mind's bioelectric brainwave patterns, the sort of hypnosis. At least that is what I think happens. That is why it is kept in that box. I managed to have the case scanned a few years back. There isn't anything all that unusual about it, but it does act as a good shield to a variety of magnetic and electromagnetic waves. "Hypnosis?" Alex asked in disbelief. "Come on. I've been under before, but it never felt like that. Hypnosis wouldn't linger like this." Undergoing hypnosis is part of fleet training. Officers and agents are trained to recognize it, but Alex could not let Rawl know that she had that experience. Rawl nodded his head in agreement. "I know. That is only part of the effect and a loose analogy at best." His face contorted with a sign of bitter determination. "The most negative aspect is that it is addictive. I think it connects with pleasure centers or other vital brain functions." "Addictive? What do you mean addictive?" Alex asked with dread and a touch of anger. The fleet police give their junior officers tests to determine their strengths and weaknesses. When junior officer Alexandra Novastra had taken her tests some 15 years ago, one of her main weaknesses was classified as an overwhelmingly strong fear of losing control and the subsequent dependence of becoming addicted, senile, insane, or permanently disabled. She had never seen her test scores. No one sees their own scores. They do not need to. The tests themselves reveal the answers. If you pass, the fleet has confidence you will overcome or deal with your weak spots. "I mean instantly addictive," Rawl replied. "Instantly with the potential of disastrous side effects for everyone. I think of it as lethal. Not lethal to the user, but lethal to all of civilization. It has always been guarded by a keeper because of its addictiveness in addition to its power. It is a paradox. It is a pretty and curious thing. Therefore, people are bound to look at it. Looking at it activates the addiction. Yielding to the dependency, holding it and looking at it, is using it. As you look at it, you impress upon the sphere your brainwave patterns, your thoughts, desires, and dreams. However, it should never be used by a single individual. It is said that it is the most powerful item in the galaxy that can work for the good of all. If it is used by an individual, its power will be perverted by the will of the user. Its force would be diverted from the good for all to the wants of one. It would work against life and civilization rather than for them. It uses its keeper. It guides their thoughts, desires, and actions. But it does this in an indirect fashion. At least, that is what all the legends and stories and my personal experiences seem to indicate. It is now attuned to you. It can work with you now so long as you do not look at it and concentrate on it directly. When it is allowed to do its work properly, there is hope for peace and goodness. It takes a good will and strong character to carry it. That is why we have chosen you. Take it and let it use you. However, you must never look at it, no matter that the addiction calls you. Keep it in its case. It will work with you from there. The box seems to disguise it from most scanners and offers some shielding for you. I don't like this. Habituates scare me. Hell, you've already gotten me hooked. Alexandra rose and paced the floor. She had a nagging feeling that suggested another long stare at the sphere would relieve the nagging feeling. Wait. You said that is why we have chosen you. Who are we? Rawl chuckled. Sorry. It has become habit. We, as in the sphere and me. Long ago I gave up trying to determine which thoughts were my own and which were guided by the sphere. Getting you attuned to the sphere was necessary to accustom the two of you to each other, and unfortunately you cannot do that without triggering the dependency. Rawl's tired old face reflected, as best as Alex could read Eridanes, that he was sincere and concerned. There is a storm coming, Alexandria. Civilization may hang in the balance. The sphere needs the resources of the right person to calm the worst of it. Alex was not sure she understood her situation. Alexandra Novastra was not a believer of magic, mysticism, ghosts, goblins, or gods. She could not deny the strange feelings she was having, nor could she deny the way pieces of legend connected with Rawl's bits of information. It required some leap of faith. Likewise, Lieutenant Commander Novastra was under orders to obtain this device and bring it to Admiral Smalls, orders she now had very negative feelings about. Are you telling me that I have no free will? That none of us has free will? That this little ball controls us all? Rawls stood and stared out of one of his large picture windows. From his vantage point on the 50th floor of his condoplex, the view of the starry night sky over bustling Ergo was calming. Throughout time, civilizations of free will have been controlled. Earth's past is riddled with this enigma. Governments free their people by creating laws controlling them. Gods grant the right to choose while punishing wrong choices with eternal ordeals worse than death itself. The Cainites of Gamma 3C Major allow free elections with the outcome ordered by the elected, and the Cainites consider themselves happy, healthy, and free. What is so different about this little ball, as you call it? Are you addicted? Rawl did not look like any of the neurotap addicts Alex had arrested. All its keepers, past and present, have felt and feel its addiction. Like you, we had to be attuned to it so it could work through us. How many keepers are there? Alex's research revealed that there must have been many keepers over the years, but she had never been able to determine if there was only one keeper at a time. There is only one sphere, though it has been kept secret for centuries. As such, there have been a lot of keepers. But at any given moment in time, there may be only 2 or 3 living, maybe 5 at most. Most keepers have been able to keep their secret until the end of their lives, passing it on and then passing away. Sometimes, if the greedy or power-hungry get too close, a keeper will pass it on to cover the trail. Something has been brewing for the last half-century or so. The sphere has changed hands more than it had in the past. It has been in my charge for just under a decade, but I have had less luck at keeping the secret than many of my predecessors. You are evidence of that. The keeper that passed it on to me suspected that the previous keeper was trying to get it back. Perhaps the addiction was too much for her, or perhaps she entered into senility and could not separate reality from her desires. The rapid change of hands is an indicator of the storm. Alex was frightened. Admittedly, she had come looking for Rawl, following breadcrumbs from children's rhymes with hopes of finding some fact or fiction about the sphere. She had learned that he had knowledge of this now unmyth. It was her job. She remembered how silly it seemed when Admiral Smalls had assigned her the task to confirm or deny the sphere of legends and childhood games, but the Admiral had provided her with some tantalizing evidence. It seemed like a good hunting exercise. Dig deep, see how far she could go, and in the end report back with some debunking facts, or so she thought. She dug into the myths and legends, researched and did some top-notch sleuthing. She found hundreds of dead ends, but when she was about to throw it all in, some cryptic piece of information would pay off. Tiny bit by tiny bit, she found her way to Rawl. It was a good hunting exercise. She was upset that Rawl had subjected her to an addictive without first warning her. Its habituate properties were never mentioned, not even in the silliest child's rhyme, at least not in so many words. In almost all of the information and stories about the sphere, there was a running theme of a strong desire to possess the thing, like in the child's game, Sphere Come Here. Keeper, keeper of the sphere, guide the future far and near. Do not leave my sight, my dear. Child with the sphere, come here. Was the sphere only a convenient legendary tool for the creation of children's games, or was this a reference not only to the power it represents, but its addictiveness? An hour ago she would not have considered it. Now she wasn't so sure. The desire to get or keep the sphere may not have been due solely to its special rareness, beauty, or power, but perhaps because of its habit-forming quality. Was part of its addictiveness a result of its representing power? At first, the assignment seemed like an exercise. Now came the possibility that this exercise might prove fatal to her, to everything. Yet there is a certain excitement when dealing with a mysterious legend. Could she in some way be an agent of good by being the next keeper of the sphere? She always wanted to lead an honorable life and promote peace and order. That is why she became a fleet officer. But could she, through the sphere, do more than tamp down on pirates, bad guys, and terrorists? A craving was eating at her. Was it a feeling of fortune or longing for greatness, or the addiction? Regardless, there might be a chance to provide something useful through her existence. It certainly induced interest, but her beliefs were running headlong into myths she had always rejected as foolishness. While she wrestled with these feelings and revelations, Rawl offered some encouragement. I will be available to help you for as long as my body and mind are able. I still have quite a few years ahead of me, but you must be careful, even of me. Then why give me this thing? Why didn't you keep it? Why did you even let me know you had it, or that it was real for that matter? Other people must have asked you about it. Hell, it is an almost universal mythology. When I came to you with questions, why didn't you brush it off as so much storytelling, as you must have done with hundreds of other people? You are right. I've denied its existence in order to keep it safe. But there is something about you. Your research has been very thorough. You had some rather obscure details available to you. Beyond all that, there is something about you. You are clever, strong, young, and disciplined. I have good feelings about you. You are in the right places at the right time. You know how to keep secrets, believe me, I know. I have faith in you. I am old. Its demands can be heavy. I am no longer quick enough or strong enough to protect it. The paths to me are starting to become well worn. You are proof of that. It has been in my possession long enough. It is time for it to change hands. New strength and a new mind are needed. Alex began to suspect that Rawl knew more about her than he let on. Perhaps he knew her secret, but still he had given her the sphere. The legends, combined with Alex's new truths, were starting to unravel the confusing knot of mystery that surrounded it. Keepers guarding it, hiding it, keeping it away from public scrutiny as they passed it secretly from one elusive individual to another. The power-hungry fighting to secure it. And yet the keepers had kept it hidden and even pushed its truth into myth over the centuries. Whole wars could be waged to obtain it because of a belief in its power, or for an unrequited addiction. Mystical powers have a way of corrupting minds, and this one was compounded with an addiction. Rawl had said the sphere was indestructible by conventional means. It could not be randomly discarded, as it would fall into unknown hands, untrained hands. It would be found, even accidentally, and its habituate quality would guarantee its improper use. The potential destruction of everything by a wasted mind that would have no idea the desire to seek release from the craving would be the very reason the world was falling apart around them. It had to be kept, guarded, to protect civilization from it. A good keeper could help the sphere prevent destruction. Rawl, is this all real? Isn't this all just myths and holo stories? What do you require, some miracle display of power? Myths and legends spring from something. Some kernel sets them off, and there it sits. Do you not feel its strength even now while it is shielded from you? Alex could not deny the wanting feeling in the back of her mind. The memory of her sphere trip was as sharp as the reality that surrounded her. You said a storm is coming. What exactly do you mean? Rawl frowned. I refer to the problems of civilization. I am not talking about disasters or endings. Its power works only for or against the sentient beings of the galaxy. It was becoming clear to Alex that she was now in control. She was in control of the situation, but was she in control of herself? Meanwhile, there was the addiction. If she gave her attention to the nagging, she felt a want for the sphere, a desire to drift back into its flawless surface and be engulfed by the world it created where she reigned supreme. She was ravenous to have its reflections paint a world of her own again. She craved to be consumed by it, to be one with the sphere and its subtle magic, for her to be the ruler of the world that it created. That need was tempered with the knowledge that she should not use it. To gaze at it was to use it, and she knew she should not. So what do I do, Rawl? My dear Alexandria, that is up to you. You have many decisions ahead of you, free choices and controlled ones. Just do not use it. It will know what to do, and when, and how. Have faith in it and yourself, and if you find you are never used by it and are never thrust into greatness, then that will be the purpose of your life, to carry it safely to the next keeper, and to be a disciple of its power. Alex was really beginning to crinkle up inside, feelings of anger, fear, and giddiness, all glued together with confusion. Lieutenant Commander Alexandra Novastra, the technocrat, a believer in technology and the order of the affiliate, a believer of sentient will and determinism, finds herself possessing some mystic power over the lives of trillions, some magical mumbo-jumbo that could destroy everything, or so the legends say, and there it was in that box. She had been given a gift she could not believe in that could destroy all she did believe in. Yet if she gave credence to a fraction of the myths and her commanding officer's interests, combined with what she was now feeling, she could not put it down and walk away. She moved to the table where Rawl had laid the box. She snatched up the case and slung the strap over her shoulder. The whole of the galaxy hung heavy inside. Slowly making her way to the door, she stopped. Looking over her shoulder, she quietly asked, "Will I be able to find you?" "This is my home. I will live here perhaps with the first bit of peace I have had in a good while. If I should move, I will tell you. Relax. The universe has not suddenly changed because of your new charge." Despite the position Rawl had put her in, he was a reassuring soul. She left Rawl's apartment and paged a cab. It was nearly 0130 affiliate time, but after 4 in the morning to this city. Nonetheless, it was alive with activity. Ergo is the capital of Eridus, which is the capital planet of the Epsilon Eridani system. As a system-wide governmental hub, this metropolis never sleeps. The cab pulled up, and Alexandria ordered the computer to the Un's spaceport. The city rushed by, its nighttime colors and lights blurring into memories of her sphere dream. As she arrived at the spaceport, she noticed that another cab arrived with her. It was probably nothing, but her officer training forced her to take notice. At the flight office, she logged the necessary notice and requested that her ship be prepared. Again her training kicked in as she observed an individual also making preparations to fly out. It wasn't an uncommon thing. People were coming and going in droves. Ergo is a busy place. But something about this particular instance was setting off a small alarm in her mind. She headed out to her Mitsubishi warped at 3000 and began the process of leaving the Eridus gravity well. As she carried out the familiar and reaffirming tasks of piloting and drifted up into the comforting solitude of the darkness, her mind began to work overtime. Initially, it had all seemed like some silly exercise. She was given the task of researching a legend mixed with myth and fairy tales. And if such a thing turned out to be true or merely based on some reality, gather all evidence and bring it in. And there it was, Tinkerbell, a doomsday machine, and a drug all in a single package at her side. At the outset, she did not believe it, as her research and tracking revealed more half-truths and eventually realities. Her drive to resolve the riddles had taken control. But now it was real. It was true, and it was done. New questions began to fill the gap created by the resolution of the task. Why would a senior official have even considered such a quest? Why was he so insistent to the point of actually acquiring the thing if it did exist? All the tales suggested that it was an object of great power that could reshape the galaxy. Rawl had confirmed those legends. In an early meeting with him, he had warned that it was a potentially destructive device not to be toyed with, as it did not follow any conventional rules of use. Why did Admiral Smalls seem so obsessed with this thing? Admirals are admirals because they are driven and power-hungry. You do not rise that high in any system simply because you have good skills. You have to rub elbows, do favors and brown nose, and you do those things for a reason. While some elected officials may run with a true desire to serve the public, somewhere deep down they believe their ways, their ideas, their approach is somehow better, and that is why they should lead and not follow. But there was something more to this. The request to find facts about this thing came from an armed force. It may have started with some elected official in the UN or the affiliate, but it was passed on to the fleet. The request may have originated in the fleet itself. Regardless, it was an armed force that wanted proof the sphere did not exist, or the thing itself. An armed force that wants a mythic device with the power to change worlds cannot be a good thing. These thoughts ran through Alex's mind at a mile a minute as the gravity of Eridus slowly released her to the weightlessness of open space. Then her artificial gravity kicked in, and with a sharp tug downward, that little alarm in her head went off again. Looking at the traffic display, she observed a craft that seemed to be shadowing her, but there were a lot of ships leaving and arriving. It was a small vessel much like her own. Had Smalls set a bloodhound on the tail of his own dog? It wasn't unusual, especially when a higher-up was driven towards some goal. At that moment, Rawls' words came back to her mind. The paths to me are starting to become well-worn. The universe has not suddenly changed because of your new charge. She was now the keeper. She had to broaden her scope. It was possible that Smalls had put a tail on her, but it was also possible that someone else was looking for this legendary device, some government or terrorist group or power-hungry individual, or some past keeper whose mind had been flipped by dependence. This changed her whole perspective. Being an officer of the fleet, she always had a healthy suspicion, but now she must be doubly leery, if not completely mistrustful. Admiral Small's strange determination to locate this thing of myths and legends, and the thought that she might be turning over an addictive bomb made her feel uneasy. The idea that she was being shadowed by who knows who, wanting the same bomb, only fueled that fear. She had always followed orders, but if you were ordered to give your commander the key to a universally destructive device, would you? If you were ordered to bring a secret, devastating power out into the open of an organization, knowing that countless other folk may be looking to wrest it away, should you? Can you trust your commander and your affiliations more than yourself at keeping a secret? Does keeping a secret mean not telling anyone, even when ordered? She wanted time to think. She wasn't sure who was following her or if she was being followed at all. If it was a hound from the fleet, someone watching their own, she had to appear like she was still at her task. If it was someone looking for the sphere itself, she had to lose them. Rather than plotting a speedy, straight course to affiliate HQ, she opted for a slow track, including a pop out of hyperspace halfway between. She wanted to give herself an out if she determined she needed it. Hopscotching through hyperspace was a tried and true technique. Space is large, and even hyperholes can take hours, days, or weeks to travel. She would give herself some time to be able to relax and ponder and calculate. The idea of carrying a mystic, religious icon, of it working through her, and of being hooked on it, bothered her. But even worse was the realization that she had become a universal target, perhaps hounded by her own as well as countless unknowns. Why not zip right on home and proudly report her duty, be rid of it, and seek ways of dealing with the addiction? Had the sphere actually changed her? Why did she want to delay the completion of her orders? Were these her own feelings, or were they some magical implants from the sphere? How much of herself was left? Was she all Alexandra Novastra, or something less, or more? Could she trust her instincts and trained reactions? Should she even be asking these questions of herself? For now at least, she thought it best to do what she felt was right. Whether those feelings were her own or not, they made sense and could do no harm. Admiral Smalls would expect a report. If he did have her followed, the lack of a report would stick out like a sore thumb, so she would have to send him one. Fortunately, neutrino pulse transmissions are not much quicker than the average hypervessel. HQ always has to deal with large time lags. Good officers use that fact for a variety of purposes. It gives spies and unfortunately criminals an edge. The overwhelming size of space was her advantage. She filed a report, one that, like so many reports, really didn't say anything. Then she tapped on a few keys and called up a list of tunes, enough to last for one full day. She punched the buttons that ran the flight program, and her tiny ship powered its primary engine. An artificial density wave erupted in front of the little craft, boring an abyss through the fabric of space and time. Her little vessel fell into the human-made wormhole, and then space collapsed in, closing the gap. She then opened a cabinet and took out a bottle of Jack Daniels. She needed a good, long drunk.